In 1949, when Chairman Mao came to power, his wife Jiang Qing, who later became known as Madame Mao, revolutionized Chinese theater as a whole.
Before Chairman Mao came to power, the theatrical performances mostly consisted of happiness, mimes, and acrobatic displays. When Chairman Mao came to power, the theater changed drastically. The theater consisted of heroic stories about revolutionaries and communists.
Through these operas, Madame Mao developed a new style of play dubbed the Eight Model Plays. These plays depicted the world in black and white.
There are good guys and bad guys, the good guys predominantly being farmers, peasants, and revolutionaries. The bad guys are landlords and anti-revolutionaries. These two character tropes were displayed drastically different, the protagonist being boldly center stage in the spotlight with light makeup on.
The antagonists were portrayed in darker makeup and were placed on the outskirts of the stage until direct conflict with the protagonist started.
Critics called Madame Mao too restricting because she replaced all of her other forms of plays with Mao's plays. Today in modern Chinese opera, it is taken after the style of classical European operas like Carmen, Aida, and La Boheme. One popular opera singer is Fang Jiang, who is currently the background music.
Much like theater, Chinese paintings and sculptures were reformed to portray the heroism of the common man or display the majesty of the homeland.
Artists started painting and sculpting life instead of copying ancient masterpieces. But the excessive oversight of the communist regime soon started to take its toll. Artists stopped thinking creatively, and every painting was a copy of the one next to it. The communists tried to relight the flame for creativity during the 100 Flowers movement, but that was cut short by the anti-rightist purge of 1950s.
Creative thought was further reduced in the Great Leap Forward. Creativity was thoroughly wiped out in the Cultural Revolution of the mid-60s to mid-70s.
Although the Cultural Revolution was only supposed to bring conformance and parties' present thoughts, it ended in the persecution of many well-known artists and had a nullifying effect on creativity. Since the Cultural Revolution, Chinese art has re-established itself in Chinese culture as well as the world. Chinese art is bought by many people worldwide.
Contemporary Chinese art varies from street art and invisible men to videos involving interest in the human body and a love for traditional Chinese art.
Invisible men are street artists who use body paint to paint themselves to match their art, then stand against their art and take a photo. This is supposed to represent artists being engulfed by their work and not being recognized. A theme that can be seen during this time period are the revolutionaries. This theme is extended into the music of the mid to late 20th century.
Maoists considered pop music from the nationalist period to be explicit and not acceptable for the public. Pop music was also considered an artistic decline from the music of the mainland.
Revolutionary songs were praise of the state. The Red Guard during the Cultural Revolution promoted revolutionary music as the only acceptable type of music. During the Cultural Revolution, much like paintings and sculptures, the non-revolutionary songs and the artists that made them all but disappeared.
After the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, a new fast-paced genre of music appeared called Northwest Wind. This genre was an attempt to counter the government.
The Northwest Wind style would further evolve in the 1990s to modern Chinese rock. The music in China remained under the control of the state, so rock music never fully went mainstream. Today, Chinese music attracts millions at the Midi Modern Music Festival and the Snow Mountain Music Festival. In the West, these are referred to as Chinese Woodstock.
Though these festivals draw major crowds, this term is not quite official because it never reached mainstream culture.
Like everything else, the communists saw movies as an opportunity for propaganda. It took over the movies, producing movies centering around peasants, farmers, soldiers, and workers. Movie attendance increased to an all-time high, from 47 million to 415 million in 10 years. In the 17 years between the foundation of the People's Republic to the Cultural Revolution, more than 700 movies were produced and over 8,000 documentaries.
Chinese filmmakers were sent to Moscow to study Soviet filmmaking in an attempt to mimic their style of writing and producing. In an attempt to spread this all around China, the Beijing Film Academy opened in 1956.
Animated films became popular to teach and educate children. It took many forms such as folk art, shadow plays, puppetry, and traditional paintings. After the thawing of censorship, Chinese movies became less dependent on their Soviet counterparts.
During the Cultural Revolution, the film industry took a severe hit, not recovering until the early 80s. During the 80s, the movie industry released scar dramas, which depicted the emotional traumas left by the Cultural Revolution.
In the late 80s, the fifth generation movement started. This included movies with a more traditional sense of storytelling and an unorthodox freestyle. Through the themes of the fifth generation, movies are wide and varied. They all have a rejection of social realist tradition worked by past Chinese filmmakers.
Instead of heroic tales of soldiers, these films were built on the drama of everyday life. These movies preferred psychological depth instead of the flat characters that the scar dramas offered.
After Tiananmen Square protests, this style of movie stopped being produced in bulk. Instead, amateur movies took preference among these Chinese people, called sixth generation. These were not viewed well in the eyes of the state, and so many had to go underground and use old 16mm film or digital cameras. This and the non-professional actors gave these movies more of a documentary feel.
These movies focused on the negative attributes of the Chinese culture. Sixth generation movies were not in the main Chinese film system and were popular mainly overseas.
Modern movies consist of similar movies, documentaries only released publicly overseas, and using low-budget digital cameras. These documentaries have shown to the outside world what life